Well, goodness gracious, I'm glad I'm practicing with Anna Karenina because it is certainly a challenge and it's pushing me right up to my limits for a multitude of reasons. First of all, you're going to hear some foreign languages in this reading. Anna Karenina, one of the things that really stood out to me when I first read it was the fact that characters often change languages because they're all nobles, so they know all these languages. They know German, they know French, they know English even. So the version I was reading would write it in the foreign language. If it's French, then it would write in French, and then they'd put a little asterisk, and then the translation would be at the bottom. Near the end of the book, I would say around part 7 or part 6, one of the characters just starts speaking in italics for no reason, and you're like, what? That's weird. So then you look down at the asterisk, and it says originally spoken in English. So you realize that although all the other parts of the text are in translated Russian, this particular sentence was actually spoken in English as it was and didn't need to be translated. That really stunned me, and I was like, oh, that's so cool. So this sort of polyphony, is that a word? Hold on a minute. Polyglottism is apparently the word I was looking for. That sort of the use of many languages, the ability to speak many languages, that sort of polyglottism really affected me when I read Anna Karenina for the first time. Unfortunately, I didn't realize that I would then have to read it out loud in all of those languages. So it's just been really exhausting. Not to mention that this particular chapter has more characters. So obviously it'll mean that I need a few more voices. And there's this character called Korzinski who you'll realize I'd never actually give a consistent voice to. I just kind of throw a voice at him and it doesn't sound very good at all. So apologies in advance. And then more than that, because they're all noble Russians and they live in sort of like this hyper European culture, they're doing dances from everywhere. So they're doing a mazurka, which is from Poland. They're doing the quadrille, which is from France. And I have no idea if that's how you actually pronounce it. There's all these strange words that you're going to be exposed to that may not make sense if you're listening to it with an English ear. But the fact of the matter is you're really listening with a European ear. If you're confused about what you're listening to in this particular reading, then you can go to the Gutenberg website, gutenberg.org. You can look for Anna Karenina. And you can find the HTML that I'm actually reading from. Because goodness knows there's a lot of sort of technical terms. Like, for example, because they're in this sort of elegant ball, the first, I think, 10 minutes, some outrageous number, is just dedicated to describing Kitty's outfit and Anna's outfit. Because Anna gets introduced in this chapter. For us, anyway, in the Anna Karenina Abridged series. Anna gets introduced here and she has this expansive description of everything she's wearing and everything she's not wearing. It's actually kind of outrageous and a bit tedious, but I think it really works for this sort of ball situation that we've been put into. Balls, of course, remind me a lot of Sid Meier's Pirates, wherein you, as a pirate, actually get invited to balls and you get to sort of flirt with the governor's daughters in the various colonies. And even in that game, they dress you up really nicely and they make you look really elegant in your military uniform and everything. So, yeah, it's just a really nice representation of that older culture from the 1800s. Actually, pirates would have been even earlier than that, like the 1600s, 1500s, whatever. There's some of you who haven't played the game. In fact, the vast majority of you who are just like, can you move on? So I will. Of course, with regards to an audiobook, a ball has music, and I was very motivated to put music, but unfortunately, I didn't know what music to put in, because I wanted it to be, there's all these dances, like I was talking about, like the mazurka and the quadrille, and each type of dance is relative to each type of music. The way, the waltz is a specific kind of dance, right? You don't just waltz to music that isn't in 3/4, for instance. So if I wanted to put music to this particular recording, then I would have wanted to go balls deep, and that's not something that I have the time for, especially considering that this is a mic test and it's not meant to be something very time intensive. So apologies on that count. I'm sure some of you, having seen the title and realizing, oh, this is a ball, were probably like, music! But sorry to disappoint. The background image that you're going to see is a painting by Adolf Menzel called Supper at the Ball. But the amazing thing is, I actually found an impressionist version of this exact painting. I'm not really sure what the story is, but it's really cool that is the case. And so this impressionist version is by Edgar Degas, and it really captures this dichotomy that Kitty talks about, or rather the narrator talks about, with regards to Kitty's perception of the ball, and that there's this there's a split between people who are very familiar with the ball and they're kind of bored by it, and the women who are completely new and all they see is like this vivid arrangement of colors and bright faces, and it really cemented like the impressionist impulse towards representing the world. And so I really like that dichotomy, and I thought it was very interesting that there was actually two different versions of this one painting that I randomly found on Google Images. You know, it's not like I'm a painting connoisseur or something. I'm too much of a zoomer to be interested in painting and poetry and all this other stuff. But it is very fascinating to me that this exact dichotomy is represented in two paintings, both from the 1870s. So that's something that I quickly wanted to mention because I thought that was interesting. And more than that, you know, there's this great dichotomy that builds throughout these particular chapters regarding Kitty's romantic aspirations, not just towards Vronsky, but also towards the world. You know, the reason why she denied Levin, even though by all means Levin it seems like the more responsible choice for Kitty to have taken over Vronsky. And at the same time, the reality of Vronsky's affection and how much exactly it is that he is attracted to her rather than, I don't know, like the idea of her, I guess. Because, okay, so here's some context. Kitty is 18 and she's the youngest of this aristocratic and well-to-do family. So the other two are already married, I think. I know the oldest one is. I'm not sure about the middle one. She's the most eligible one. She's the one with the greatest market value, let's say. And so, you know, for Vronsky, who's a rising star in the military, and he's actually like a functional and renowned officer, Kitty is like the perfect match for him. But, well, calamity strikes at the ball when it turns out that the passions aren't so easy to negotiate with. And Tolstoy, you know, I haven't read enough Tolstoy to say this definitively, but as far as Anna Karenina is concerned, Tolstoy is very good at managing those passions and those impulses and how, you know, it's hard to repress them and they explode out when you don't really want them to. So yeah, like the previous chapter, this chapter is also about three characters. We've replaced Levin with Anna. And so, yeah, we'll see this sort of new trinity work out their particular loyalties. 3, I think, is a really good number for any social interaction. Not even like fictional interactions, but like real life interactions too. Because 3 is small enough that you can actually focus on each other's words and, you know, be involved in a conversation. But with 2 people, which is the maximal amount that you can do that, the conversation kind of sputters every once in a while, you know? And with 3 people, it kind of, every time it sputters, there's always one person who hasn't caught on to something the other two have. So they'll always ask the question, and in that way, there's always something for the third person to be asking and being involved in, and the conversation kind of cycles around between who doesn't understand something. So I always think that 3 people is a really good level of social interaction. And if you're working with drama, I mean, like the easiest drama you can do is 2 people know something and 1 doesn't. It's like, and that's exactly what's happening to Kitty at this ball. So the drama builds and becomes incredibly immense in this chapter. I think this was... No, I'm not going to say that. I'll save that for a future chapter because I do, as much as I like this chapter, there's one chapter where I really thought, what a book. And I'll tell you what it was when we get there. But yeah, with all that said, I hope you enjoy The Ball. The ball was only just beginning as Kitty and her mother walked up the great staircase, flooded with light, and lined with flowers and footmen in powder and red coats. From the rooms came a constant steady hum as from a hive and the rustle of movement, and while on the landing they gave last touches to their hair and dresses before the mirror, they heard from the ballroom the careful, distinct notes of the fiddles of the orchestra beginning the first waltz. A little old man in civilian dress, arranging his grey curls before another mirror, and diffusing an odour of scent, stumbled against them on the stairs, and stood aside, evidently admiring Kitty, whom he did not know. A beardless youth, one of those society youths whom the old Prince Sherbatsky called young bucks, in an exceedingly open waistcoat, straightening his white tie as he went, bowed to them, and after running by, came back to ask Kitty for a quadrille. As the first quadrille had already been given to Vronsky, she had to promise this youth the second. An officer, buttoning his glove, stood aside in the doorway and, stroking his moustache, admired rosy Kitty. Although her dress, her coiffure, and all the preparations for the ball had cost Kitty great trouble and consideration, At this moment, she walked into the ballroom in her elaborate tulle dress over a pink slip as easily and simply as though all the rosettes and lace, all the minute details of her attire had not cost her or her family a moment's attention, as though she had been born in all that tulle and lace, with her hair done up high on her head and a rose winged with 2 leaves on the top of it. When, just before entering the ballroom, the princess, her mother, tried to turn right side out of the ribbon of her sash, Kitty had drawn back a little. She felt that everything must be right of itself, and graceful, and nothing could need setting straight. It was one of Kitty's best days. Her dress was not uncomfortable anywhere, her lace bertha did not droop anywhere. Her rosettes were not crushed nor torn off, her pink slippers with high, hollowed-out heels did not pinch but gladdened her feet, and the thick rolls of fair chignon kept up on her head as if they were her own hair. All the 3 buttons buttoned up without tearing on the long glove that covered her hand without concealing its lines. The black velvet of her locket nestled with special softness round her neck. That velvet was delicious. At home, looking at her neck in the looking-glass, Kitty had felt that the velvet was speaking. About all the rest there might be a doubt, but the velvet was delicious. Kitty smiled here too at the ball when she glanced at it in the glass. Her bare shoulders and arms gave Kitty a sense of cold marble, a feeling she particularly liked. Her eyes sparkled, and her rosy lips could not keep from smiling from the consciousness of her own attractiveness. She had scarcely entered the ballroom and reached the throng of ladies, all tulle, ribbons, lace, and flowers, waiting to be asked to dance. Kitty was never one among that crowd, when she was asked for a waltz, and asked by the best partner, the first star in the hierarchy of the ballroom, a renowned director of dances, a married man, handsome and well-built, Yegorushka Korzunsky. He had only just left the Countess Bonina, with whom he had danced the first half of the waltz, and, scanning his kingdom, that is to say, a few couples who had started dancing, he caught sight of Kitty, entering, and flew up to her with that peculiar, easy amble which is confined to directors of balls. Without even asking her if she cared to dance, he put out his arm to encircle her slender waist. She looked round for someone to give her fan to, and their hostess, smiling to her, took it. "How nice you've come in good time," he said to her, embracing her waist. "Such a bad habit to be late." Bending her left hand, she laid it on his shoulder, and her little feet in their pink slippers began swiftly, lightly, and rhythmically moving over the slippery floor in time to the music. "It's a rest to waltz with you," he said to her as they fell into the first slow steps of the waltz. "It's exquisite, such lightness, precision." He said to her the same thing he said to almost all his partners, whom he knew well. She smiled at his praise, and continued to look about the room over his shoulder. She was not like a girl at her first ball, for whom all faces in the ballroom melt into one vision of fairyland. And she was not a girl who had gone the stale round of balls till every face in the ballroom was familiar and tiresome. But she was in the middle stage between these two. She was excited, and at the same time she had sufficient self-possession to be able to observe. In the left corner of the ballroom she saw the cream of society gathered together. There, incredibly naked, was the beauty Lydie, Korzunsky's wife. There was the lady of the house. There shone the bald head of Kriven, always to be found where the best people were. In that direction gazed the young men, not venturing to approach. There too she descried Stiva, and there she saw the exquisite figure and head of Anna in a black gown. And he was there. Kitty had not seen him since the evening she refused Levin. With her long-sighted eyes, she knew him at once, and was even aware that he was looking at her. "Another turn, eh? You're not tired?" "No, thank you." "Where shall I take you?" "Madame Karenina is here, I think. Take me to her." "Wherever you command." And Korzunsky began waltzing with measured steps straight towards the group in the left corner, continually saying, "Pardon, madame. Pardon. Pardon, madame," and steering his course through the sea of lace, tulle, and ribbon, and not disarranging a feather. He turned his partner sharply around so that her slim ankles, in light transparent stockings, were exposed to view, and her train floated out in fan shape and covered Kriven's knees. Korzunsky bowed, set straight his open shirt front, and gave her his arm to conduct her to Anna Arkadyevna. Kitty, flushed, took her train from Kriven's knees, and, a little giddy, looked round, seeking Anna. Anna was not in lilac, as Kitty had so urgently wished, but in a black, low-cut, velvet gown, showing her full throat and shoulders, and her rounded arms with tiny, slender wrists that looked as though carved in old ivory. The whole gown was trimmed with Venetian guipure. On her head, among her black hair, her own with no false additions, was a little wreath of pansies, and a bouquet of the same in the black ribbon of her sash among white lace. Her coiffure was not striking. All that was noticeable was the little wilful tendrils of her curly hair that would always break free about her neck and temples. Round her well-cut, strong neck was a thread of pearls. Kitty had been seeing Anna every day. She adored her and had pictured her invariably in lilac. But now, seeing her in black, she felt that she had not fully seen her charm. She saw her now as someone quite new and surprising to her. Now she understood that Anna could not have been in lilac, and that her charm was just that she always stood out against her attire, that her dress could never be noticeable on her. And her black dress, with its sumptuous lace, was not noticeable on her, it was only the frame, and all that was seen was she. Simple, natural, elegant, and at the same time gay and eager. She was standing holding herself, as always, very erect, and when Kitty drew near the group she was speaking to the master of the house, her head slightly turned towards him. "No, I don't throw stones," she was saying in answer to something. "Though I can't understand it," she went on, shrugging her shoulders, and she turned at once with a soft smile of protection towards Kitty. With a flying, feminine glance, she scanned her attire and made a movement of her head, hardly perceptible, but understood by Kitty, signifying approval of her dress and her looks. "You came into the room dancing," she added. "This is one of my most faithful supporters," said Korsunsky, bowing to Anna Arkadyevna, whom he must have missed when he surveyed his kingdom. "The princess helps to make balls happy and successful. Anna Arkadyevna, a waltz?" he said, bending down to her. "Why, have you met?" inquired their host. "Is there anyone we have not met? My wife and I are like white wolves. Everyone knows us. A waltz, Anna Arkadyevna?" "I don't dance when it's possible not to dance," she said. "But tonight, it's impossible," answered Korsunsky. At that instant, Vronsky came up. "Well, since it's impossible tonight, let us start," she said, not noticing Vronsky's bow, and she hastily put her hand on Korsunsky's shoulder. "What is she vexed with him about?" thought Kitty, discerning that Anna had intentionally not responded to Vronsky's bow. Vronsky went up to Kitty, reminding her of the first quadrille, and expressing his regret that he had not seen her all this time. Kitty gazed in admiration at Anna waltzing, and listened to him. She expected him to ask her for a waltz, but he did not, and she glanced wonderingly at him. He flushed slightly, and hurriedly asked her to waltz, but he had only just put his arm round her waist and taken the first step when the music suddenly stopped. Kitty looked into his face, which was so close to her own, and, long afterwards, for several years after, that look, full of love, to which he made no response, cut her to the heart with an agony of shame. "Pardon, pardon! Waltz! Waltz!" shouted Korsunsky from the other side of the room, and seizing the first young lady he came across, he began dancing himself. Vronsky and Kitty waltzed several times round the room. After the first waltz, Kitty went to her mother, and she had hardly time to say a few words to Countess Nordsten when Vronsky came up again for the first quadrille. During the quadrille, nothing of any significance was said. There was disjointed talk between them of the Korsunskys, husband and wife, whom he described very amusingly as delightful children at 40. They spoke also of the future town theatre, and only once the conversation touched her to the quick, when he asked her about Levin, whether he was here, and added that he liked him so much. But Kitty did not expect much from the quadrille. She looked forward with a thrill at her heart to the mazurka. She fancied that in the mazurka everything must be decided. The fact that he did not, during the quadrille, ask her for the mazurka did not trouble her. She felt sure she would dance the mazurka with him, as she had done at former balls, and so believing, refused 5 young men, saying she was engaged for the mazurka. The whole ball up to the last quadrille was for Kitty an enchanted vision of delightful colours, sounds, and motions. She only sat down when she felt too tired and begged for a rest. But as she was dancing the last quadrille with one of the tiresome young men whom she could not refuse, she chanced to be vis-à-vis with Vronsky and Anna. She had not been near Anna again since the beginning of the evening, and now, again, she saw her suddenly quite new and surprising. She saw in her the signs of that excitement of success she knew so well in herself. She saw that she was intoxicated with the delighted admiration she was arousing. She knew that feeling and knew its signs and saw them in Anna, saw the quivering, flashing light in her eyes, and the smile of happiness and excitement unconsciously playing on her lips, and the deliberate grace, precision, and lightness of her movements. Who? She asked herself. All? Or one? And not assisting the harassed young man she was dancing with in the conversation, the thread of which he had lost and could not pick up again, she obeyed with external liveliness the peremptory shouts of Korzinski, starting them all into the Grand Ronde and then into the chaîne, and at the same time she kept watch with a growing pang at her heart. No, it's not the admiration of the crowd has intoxicated her, but the adoration of one. And that one? Can it be he? Every time he spoke to Anna, the joyous light flashed into her eyes, and the smile of happiness curved her red lips. She seemed to make an effort to control herself, to try not to show these signs of delight, but they came out on her face of themselves. But what of him? Kitty looked at him and was filled with terror. What was pictured so clearly to Kitty in the mirror of Anna's face she saw in him. What had become of his always self-possessed, resolute manner and the carelessly serene expression of his face? Now, every time he turned to her, he bent his head as though he would have fallen at her feet, and in his eyes there was nothing but humble submission and dread. I would not offend you, his eyes seemed every time to be saying, but I want to save myself, and I don't know how. On his face was a look such as Kitty had never seen before. They were speaking of common acquaintances, keeping up the most trivial conversation, but to Kitty it seemed that every word they said was determining their fate and hers. And strange it was that they were actually talking of how absurd Ivan Ivanovich was with his French, and how the Iletsky girl should have had a better match. Yet these words had all the while consequence for them, and they were feeling just as Kitty did. The whole ball, the whole world. Everything seemed lost in fog in Kitty's soul. Nothing but the stern discipline of her upbringing supported her and forced her to do what was expected of her. That is, to dance, to answer questions, to talk, even to smile. But before the mazurka, when they were beginning to rearrange the chairs and a few couples moved out of the smaller rooms into the big room, a moment of despair and horror came for Kitty. She had refused 5 partners, and now she was not dancing the mazurka. She had not even a hope of being asked for it, because she was so successful in society that the idea would never occur to anyone that she had remained disengaged till now. She would have to tell her mother she felt ill and go home, but she had not the strength to do this. She felt crushed. She went to the furthest end of the little drawing room and sank into a low chair. Her light, transparent skirts rose like a cloud about her slender waist. One bare, thin, soft, feminine arm, hanging listlessly, was lost in the folds of her pink tunic. In the other she held her fan, and with rapid short strokes fanned her burning face. But while she looked like a butterfly, clinging to a blade of grass, and just about to open its rainbow wings for fresh flight, her heart ached with horrible despair. But perhaps I am wrong. Perhaps it was not so. And again she recalled all she had seen. Kitty, what is it? Said Countess Nordsten, stepping noiselessly over the carpet towards her. I don't understand it. Kitty's lower lip began to quiver. She got up quickly. Kitty, you're not dancing the mazurka. No, said Kitty, in a voice shaking with tears. He asked her for the mazurka before me, said Countess Nordsten, knowing Kitty would understand who were he and her. And she said, why aren't you going to dance it with Princess Shtcherbatskaya? Oh, I don't care, answered Kitty. No one but she herself understood her position. No one knew that she had just refused the man whom, perhaps, she loved, and refused him because she had put her faith in another. Countess Nordsten found Korzinski, with whom she was to dance the mazurka, and told him to ask Kitty. Kitty danced in the first couple, and luckily for her she had not to talk, because Korzinski was all the time running about directing the figure. Vronsky and Anna sat almost opposite her. She saw them with her long-sighted eyes, and saw them too close by when they met in the figures, and the more she saw of them, the more convinced was she that her unhappiness was complete. She saw that they felt themselves alone in that crowded room, and on Vronsky's face, always so firm and independent, she saw that look that had struck her, of bewilderment and humble submissiveness, like the expression of an intelligent dog when it has done wrong. Anna smiled, and her smile was reflected by him. She grew thoughtful, and he became serious. Some supernatural force drew Kitty's eyes to Anna's face. She was fascinating in her simple black dress. Fascinating were her round arms with their bracelets. Fascinating was her firm neck with its thread of pearls. Fascinating the straying curls of her loose hair. Fascinating the graceful, light movements of her little feet and hands. Fascinating was that lovely face in its eagerness, but there was something terrible and cruel in her fascination. Kitty admired her more than ever, and more acute was her suffering. Kitty felt overwhelmed, and her face showed it when Vronsky saw her coming across her in the mazurka. He did not at once recognize her. She was so changed. "Delightful ball," he said to her for the sake of saying something. "Yes," she answered. In the middle of the mazurka, repeating a complicated figure newly invented by Korzinski, Anna came forward into the center of the circle, chose 2 gentlemen, and summoned a lady and Kitty. Kitty gazed at her in dismay as she went up. Anna looked at her with drooping eyelids and smiled, pressing her hand, but noticing that Kitty only responded to her smile by a look of despair and amazement, she turned away from her and began gaily talking to the other lady. "Yes, there is something uncanny, devilish, and fascinating in her," Kitty said to herself. Anna did not mean to stay to supper, but the master of the house began to press her to do so. "Nonsense, Anna Arkadyevna," said Korzinski, drawing her bare arm under the sleeve of his dress coat. "I've such an idea for a cotillon, un bijou." And he moved gradually on, trying to draw her along with him. Their host smiled approvingly. "No, I am not going to stay," answered Anna, smiling. But in spite of her smile, both Korzinski and the master of the house saw from her resolute tone that she would not stay. "No, why, as it is, I have danced more at your ball in Moscow than I have all the winter in Petersburg," said Anna, looking round at Vronsky, who stood near her. "I must rest a little before my journey." "Are you certainly going tomorrow, then?" asked Vronsky. "Yes, I suppose so," answered Anna, as it were wondering at the boldness of his question, but the irrepressible, quivering brilliance of her eyes and her smile set him on fire as she said it. Anna Arkadyevna did not stay to supper, but went home.